the e-Enterprise for the Environment Tribal Consultation webinar. I just want to let everyone know before we get started that we are recording today's webinar. I'm going to turn it over to Andy Batten at EPA to get us started.
Welcome everyone to our e-Enterprise outreach webinar as part of our follow-on consultation with the tribes on the draft e-Enterprise governance charter. And this is a webinar for that. My name is Andy Batten, and I'm the Director of e-Enterprise for the Environment for EPA, which is located in the Office of the Chief Financial Officer. Today I will be joined by other senior leaders at EPA, Andrew Baca, who a number of the participants on this call undoubtedly already know. He is the Acting Deputy Director of the American Indian Environmental Office in the Office of International and Tribal Affairs. We're also joined by Matt Leopard, and Matt is the Director of the Office of Information Collection in the Office of Environmental Information. And we want to welcome all the tribes joining us today for this webinar. Contractor support for the webinar today is provided by Kristen Durrance of Ross Strategic, and I'm going to turn it back over to Kristen for logistics and ground rules. Kristen?
Thanks, Andy. I just want to take a quick minute. As you've probably noticed, you've come into the call muted. That's just to help us manage questions and just noise levels on the call. If you have a question, we're going to ask that you type it into the question and answer box right there on your dashboard. The other option for asking a question, if you want, is you can just type in, I have a question, and I can unmute you, and you can ask your question actually verbally over the phone. In order for me to unmute you, though, you're going to have to enter your audio PIN. That's a 2- or 3-digit number that should show up on your dashboard. It's not 72 as it shows on this slide. That's just an example. If you're already on the line, if you hit pound and then your number and then pound again, it should connect your computer to the audio. If you are listening in via your computer, the only way I can unmute you for a question is if you have a good speaker microphone. Otherwise, I'm going to have to ask you to call in or type your question in. If you type your question in, I'll read it out, and there'll be plenty of time for follow-up. If you have any questions about logistics during the webinar, or you can't hear, the audio quality gets funky for you, go ahead and also type that in, and I'll be managing that throughout the presentation. If your dashboard gets minimized against the side of your computer screen, you're going to look for this little red arrow right here. If you click on that, it should expand it back out. For the most part, it should be located on the right side of your screen. Some computers, it'll put it on the left, but it should be on that right. Click it to minimize, click it to expand again. All right, Andy, I'll turn it back over to you to go over objectives for today's webinar.
Great, thanks, Kristen. Today's webinar is part of our follow-on tribal consultation on the draft e-Enterprise governance charter. And this webinar is to inform and enable participants to ask questions about e-Enterprise for the environment in general, and to have a discussion on the revisions to the e-Enterprise charter that address tribal participation and seek to increase tribal participation in e-Enterprise governance in the current and emerging projects, and in working with EPA regions to add to the portfolio of e-Enterprise and aligned projects going forward. We're first going to have Matt Leopard and we're going to give a brief overview of e-Enterprise for the environment, and that's going to be followed by Andrew Baca, who will talk about the draft e-Enterprise charter and tribal consultation. And then I'll discuss some of the e-Enterprise projects in which tribes are currently participating, and opportunities for tribes to participate in additional projects, including a process for tribes in EPA regions to advance their own priority joint projects. When the presentation part of the webinar is concluded, we will open up the webinar for questions. And now I'm going to turn it over to Matt Leopard to give some background about e-Enterprise. Matt?
Hi, thanks everybody. Thanks, Andy, and hello everybody. So what is e-Enterprise is a question we've heard from some of you, and e-Enterprise is really a new model for collaborative leadership among environmental co-regulators, and it's aimed at simplifying and modernizing the implementation of our environmental programs. Within that, there's 3 things. E-Enterprise is about streamlining business processes, introducing technology where appropriate to maximize efficiency, and through joint governance, ensuring shared ownership and adoption of the processes that are streamlined. E-Enterprise is built on a foundation of the exchange network, and tribes have been a big part of that success. As some of you know, or hopefully all of you know, The Exchange Network is a data exchange platform to package and share environmental information among co-regulators and others. E-Enterprise is related to this because it's intended to first streamline environmental business processes and then incorporate information technology such as the Exchange Network develops for maximum benefit. The intent to streamline processes before we automate is really important because it's, we have shrinking resources and we need to implement things more efficiently and effectively. Although it's not the main subject of this consultation, E-Enterprise will continue to be woven into the Exchange Network grant program to ensure we advance both the Exchange Network and E-Enterprise in an integrated way. And I do want to mention that the tribes have been supportive of the Exchange Network from the get-go. I think 2002, since that time, we've been working with tribes to implement the Exchange Network quite successfully, and we look forward to many years ahead, fruitful years ahead, working with them on the Enterprise and the Exchange Network. So I'm going to turn this back over to Andy to talk about the 3 goals of the Enterprise.
Thanks, Matt. As Matt mentioned, E-Enterprise has established 3 goals that at a high level are really descriptive of the fundamental change that we are working towards to accomplish with our partners. The first goal is aimed at improving the effectiveness of current programs by streamlining business processes. And it's important to mention here that the streamlining and modernizing of our programs is listed as the first goal because it needs to come first before applying modern technology. That we first need to re-engineer processes and then automate or use technology where appropriate to make sure the streamlined processes are most effective and user-friendly. The second goal is really aimed at greatly enhancing service to our stakeholders, the public, and agency partners. E-Enterprise seeks to reduce the transaction costs and burdens for the regulated community and government agencies, and to improve the transparency of environmental conditions and performance for all users, including the public. An example of enhancing the user experience is the E-Enterprise portal, which many of you have seen, which will enable regulated entities, our co-regulator partners, and the public to conduct two-way transactions and customize their access to environmental information resources on the web. A component of the E-Enterprise portal will be for local government and tribal officials to access a customized set of tools that will help them meet their environmental obligations. On the next slide, really at the heart of E-Enterprise is the third goal, and I often say this could just as easily be our first goal, and that's about joint governance. Joint governance means that E-Enterprise is to be co-managed through collective conversations, negotiations, and direction setting in which the tribes, states, and EPA work together to make decisions. There are 3 governance bodies in E-Enterprise that you'll see in the charter materials. The first is the E-Enterprise Leadership Council, or we call it the EELC, which provides strategic direction for both E-Enterprise and Exchange Network activities. The next tier down is the Management Board and the Interoperability and Operations Team, which report to the E-Enterprise Leadership Council, and they both provide oversight and technical direction. The council that provides the direction to enterprise projects as well as network projects. The 2016 Partnerships Action Plan further calls upon expanding tribal participation in the enterprise, both on the governance bodies and in enterprise projects. And I'd want to turn this over to Andrew Bach at this point in time so we can talk about the first part, which is the governance bodies. Andrew.
Thank you, Andy. The first E-Enterprise Charter that was signed in September of 2013 was simply to establish the E-Enterprise Leadership Council. In doing the first review of the original charter last summer, the Leadership Council decided that it needed to be revised. One big purpose of revising it was to improve coordination between the eEnterprise project teams with the Exchange network, which is supporting the development of many shared services. The Leadership Council decided to do that by bringing eEnterprise and the Exchange network governance together, and that has been done with the creation of the Management Board and the Interoperability and Operations team. Another major revision was to increase and move towards full tribal participation throughout eEnterprise governance, and particularly on the Leadership Council. EPA initiated a first consultation on a revised draft charter for eEnterprise governance. The first consultation period lasted from March 9th to April 14th of this year. The agency received several comments, including the consultation period was too short and did not allow for adequate discussion. We received ideas from multiple commenters on how to appoint tribal members to the Leadership Council, and a significant number of comments on the number of tribal members on the Leadership Council, with suggestions that ranged from 3 to 5 to full parity with the states and EPA. The agency decided to have this follow-on consultation to allow for more time to fully engage with tribes and have further discussion on the changes we've made in the draft charter in response to the comments that were received. During this current consultation, we are especially interested in receiving tribal feedback on a number of proposals. First, EPA received significant feedback on the process by which tribal members of the Leadership Council are appointed. In this latest draft charter, EPA is proposing a process that would follow the model which we currently use to identify members of the National Tribal Caucus. Each EPA region would invite their Regional Tribal Operations Committee, or RTOC equivalent, to select a tribal representative to the Leadership Council. The first consultation also invited tribal commenters to propose ideas about how EPA might provide a means for tribes to share information and collect input on eEnterprise and Leadership Council activities from other tribal governments in their region or in their vicinity. Based on the comments received, EPA proposes to again build on an existing model of how we provide support to organizations like the National Tribal Water Council, the National Tribal Air Association, and the Exchange Network Tribal Governance Group. EPA is proposing to sponsor an organization to support the tribal members of eEnterprise governance bodies in sharing information, views, and feedback amongst tribes regarding eEnterprise. Finally, as I noted above, we received significant comments regarding the number of tribal members. I noted that we had received suggestions ranging from 3 to 5 to potentially full parity. The proposed revisions to the charter indicate that we are proposing that the Leadership Council will now have up to 10 members each from EPA, states, and tribes. In addition, the charter was revised to reflect that of those 3 groups, there would be a co-chair from each group, so a co-chair from EPA, the states, and the tribes. With that, I want to turn it back to Andy Batten to talk about the current composition of the Leadership Council.
Thanks, Andrew. The slide up on the screen right now identifies the current members of the eEnterprise Leadership Council. In the interim, we've asked the heads of 3 tribal organizations that are particularly involved in these issues, the National Congress of American Indians, the National Tribal Caucus, and the Tribal Governance Group, to identify individuals to participate in Leadership Council meetings while a process can be established in the revised charter to nominate tribal members of the eEnterprise Leadership Council. And that's the process that Andrew just described. Slide 14, it really points to the participation of tribes in eEnterprise projects. There are over 30 active eEnterprise projects right now. This slide shows where tribes are currently participating in eEnterprise projects. First, the goal for the tribal roadmap is to build and maintain data consistency and capacity in tribal water quality monitoring programs. The second, the local government portal, is for local government and small community officials to quickly assess environmental compliance assistance tools, access environmental compliance and assistance tools and resources. And discussions are underway to build a tribal component of this local government portal. This local government portal is part of the bigger eEnterprise portal, and that's the third project. The eEnterprise for the environment portal is that new user-friendly web platform that will modernize the way the public, the regulated community, and environmental co-regulators find and exchange important information and conduct two-way environmental transactions. Next slide talks about further opportunities for broader tribal participation. And as I mentioned, there are about 30 active environmental eEnterprise projects. And among these projects that may be of particular interest to tribes, but certainly not limited to this, I just wanted to highlight a couple. The Integrated Watershed Monitoring Networks project, which supports continuous monitoring in a watershed from diverse sources into a single accessible data platform. The Advanced Monitoring Project, which evaluates how environmental programs may be impacted by advances in monitoring technology and how to prepare for these changes. And third, a project that is just starting is the Respectful Use of Data Workgroup that will develop principles and processes for how data is managed and used that respects the sources of that data, both public and among eEnterprise partners. I'd also like to mention some additional opportunities to broaden tribal participation and involvement in eEnterprise work. We really are looking at institutionalizing eEnterprise as a new way of doing business within the agency and with our co-regulators. And one way of doing that is to embed eEnterprise in EPA's formal operational structure, which is what we've done when we've added eEnterprise to our national program guidances. Those are the air, water, solid waste guidances. So in the national program guidances, for all the programs, there's a statement that encourages tribes, states, and other offices to participate in current enterprise projects where they see complementary priorities, processes, or objectives. We've also embedded eEnterprise in EPA's strategic plan. It's in the partnerships cross-agency strategy and the FY 2016 action plan for that strategy. The plan starts a continuing process that asks the regions to work with the tribes and states in their local jurisdiction to bring forward priority and joint projects for business process modernization that they're either already planning or working on already. For example, Region 6 submitted a regional travel project to develop an online reporting tool for water covering the Clean Water Act 106 and 319 programs. This will take the next step with the Tribal Water Roadmap that was on one of our prior slides. And the Region 6 administrator reported that this supports the type of development that he sees could have benefit to perhaps the rest of the country as well. So I mention this as an example of the kind of projects that tribes may want to discuss with their regions as something that they could propose together under the Partnerships Action Plan as a potentially national enterprise project. In other words, we certainly want to support those projects that are local, but we're very much interested in where there's really great ideas. If there's something that might have a broader interest outside of that region, outside of that tribe, and might have national scalability, we certainly want to encourage that dialogue as well. On slide 16, I just want to provide you with a few resources that you can visit. These include the websites, so you have an opportunity to follow up and dig into more information about the various projects. In addition, I would ask you to feel free to contact any of the following people regarding eEnterprise, the draft governance charter, or the FY 2016 Partnership Action Plan. And I'd like to turn it over now back to Kristen to moderate our question and answer session.
Thanks, Andy. So I just want to remind folks, if they have questions, to go ahead and chat those into the question and answer box. Let's see what we've got. So from Victoria Flowers, good governance, management of resources, and environmental protection is based on good data. How does information get corrected if we are viewing it from EPA source and notice it is not located correctly? Will eEnterprise help facilitate this dialogue through the eEnterprise portal? And Victoria, if you have any follow-up, feel free to let me know that you want to chat it in, or I can unmute you.
This is Andy. Andy Batten. I'd like to start with answering that question. Victoria, thanks for asking that. One of the projects that I alluded to that is a new startup, and we just began this conversation in earnest at our face-to-face meeting in Nashville, and it's dealing with a subject called respectful use of data. We did we focused on a particular data source. It wasn't necessarily a discussion to pick on that data source, but we were using OECA, our Office of Enforcement and Compliance Assurance. We were using their ECHO database, and ECHO is a database that talks about compliance and where facilities are in or out of compliance. And as a result of using that just as an example of where there may be data quality issues or issues that require us to be in better synchronized with tribes and states about the status of facilities, this work group that I mentioned that's just starting to emerge on the respectful use of data is intended to tackle those issues. We do not want to be out of step with our partners when it comes to saying that, you know, EPA thinks the status of a facility is in or out of compliance and be in conflict with a tribe or a state that is more locally aware of the conditions. So it's through that respectful use of data work group that we're just starting up is where we hope to tackle that issue.
Thanks, Andy. Victoria mentioned that FRS and ECHO are particularly troublesome, but she was also wondering if there was a specific contact that they could get into touch with right now.
I know from one of Matt's staff, Matt, I'd ask you to elaborate on this, but I know on Matt's team there is an individual that is looking at the root cause analysis for some of the data issues. Matt, can you comment on that?
Well, absolutely. This has been actually a long work in progress to look at the limitations of FRS and the genesis of some of the problems and concerns that have been, that we've been familiar with for many years. And so there is an active effort. There's an integrated project team under eEnterprise to look at the facility registry system. It's gone through a first phase, and there's a report in draft. I've not looked at it in great detail, but we're going to get a presentation on that. But basically, we're moving to a new data model. I think is partly as a result of the outcome of the discussions and engagement of the IPT, as well as a bunch of other steps in the process. And the hope is to spin up a facility IPT phase 2 to get deeper into addressing the issues. And now I think, frankly, the future is very bright. I think we've really the dialogue we've had with stakeholders that has included the tribes has been very illuminating. We have some really talented people looking at the problem on my staff, but also beyond that, programs, states, and tribes have been inputting into this. So I think we're growing out a much better solution to support the facility piece. The data sensitivity issues and respectful use issues are all the more important to address now. And I think there's a great opportunity in phase 2 of this FRS IPT to get into that, as well as the new focus of EE on respectful use issues. So I think this is really a good time to get involved and to engage on this.
Great, thanks, Matt. Andy, was there anything else you wanted to touch on?
I think Matt's group is Matt is the co-chair of the interoperability team along with Chris Simmers from New Hampshire, and I know it'll be through that group we'll probably see the report that Matt alluded to. So Matt, if you are the appropriate contact for Victoria to follow up with, if is that appropriate that you may follow up with?
Absolutely, you? Victoria. Please feel free to contact me, and I'll, anytime about that. And I assume the contact information is available on the slides, but if not, we'll reach out to you. But be happy to talk.
Yeah, Matt,
yeah.
Sorry, I just got Victoria's contact information, so I'll make sure to get that to you. She also mentioned that, and I apologize if I pronounce this wrong, Victoria, but the ONIIDA has developed a database that brings in FRS and ECHO data. It is currently being displayed on a spatial viewer, and we are layering with county parcel data. This is providing us with a powerful tool to ground truth with EPA data. That's kind of a cool tool we should definitely be looking to connect.
Yeah, and absolutely. And Eddie, if you have if Victoria has the opportunity and wants to share it with us, love to take a look at it. I know we had some discussions at the Tribal Conference on this, and hopefully some of the documentation issues have gotten sorted out. I certainly raised them to my staff. I know they were working them. So glad to hear. Love to see the application, and certainly I'll be happy to be your contact on the IoT. We also have a couple tribal members, April, and I think Brianna, you're on the IoT as well. So they're also available to discuss these issues with you.
Yeah, and April's on this call now. Brianna is not, but April is also listening in today. So I don't have any other questions, Andy. I was just going to do another quick call out to folks if they have questions. I'm happy to unmute folks, although it looks like most people are listening in via their computer. But if you have questions and want to type them in, please feel free.
Kristen, I would just maybe, if I could take Victoria's question a little further, if you could go back to slide 14. So it's always risky to do a little bit of a live demo here, but on 14, we point to the e-enterprise projects that we have right now. There you go. And part of what we have committed to in our partnerships action plan is that by the end of 2016, the fiscal year 2016, so by the end of September, we are looking for this list of projects and tribes that are participating in particular. We want to grow this list to at least 5 enterprise project teams or work groups. So Victoria, I don't want to volunteer you, but if there's an interest in joining the respectful use work group that we just talked about, or any of the participants on today's call, our goal is to take this from 3 projects to 5 projects. I think that's a pretty easy bar for us, and would really like to have greater participation. So just think about this slide, and the bar being we want 2 more projects this year, and if we could exceed that, that would be great. So I hope we can achieve that and go beyond that.
Great, thank you, Andy. Do folks? Oh, hey Sarah, can you throw the contact slide back up? Yeah, there you go. Do folks have any other questions?
Matt, maybe again, just to take advantage of the time that we have, again, at the risk of going off script here a little bit, I know we get the question a lot about upcoming grants, and any changes you anticipate in the grants, or is it same type of approach this year? Any comments you want to make on that?
Well, we've had some very active dialogue with the governance of e-enterprise and the different communities under that governance, including the TGG, on you know, their feedback on last year's guidance and what has traditionally been the guidance. And we've gotten some really good feedback in that process. We are, and actually I had sent an email this morning to my staff to check in on the status of the draft. Certainly, you know, we're always looking for ways to ensure we're in line with the enterprise framework, and also simplify the process for submitters. So there are a few things like the tiering, which was problematic to a number of submitters in the past, where we provided a little additional points for one type of tiering as opposed to the other. So some of those things we're eliminating from the guidance. There also has been in the past some confusion by applicants on things like what's a partnership grant and what's not a partnership grant, and we're trying to make sure it's absolutely clear when a grant is a partnership activity, as well as recognize that partnerships are really difficult, and we shouldn't just, you know, try to force feed partnerships in areas where individual grants would also be very useful to award. So we're trying to be a little more balanced in that, as well as address some of the sensitivities on the area of mentorship. So there's a number of areas that I think people should be hopefully pleased with. We'll be going out with the grant guidance, informal draft, you know, comment in hopefully mid to end of July. So you'll be able to individuals will be able to review it and provide feedback and comment. And following that, we'll have a couple webinars to invite people to participate and share their input. So the grant guidance, normally we'd like to get it out in early fall, and so we can stay on track for award for the grant submissions in late fall or early winter, November-ish time frame. In terms of e-enterprise too, I just want to mention there's some new components to the Exchange network or / e-enterprise architecture, the technology. So we are also looking at ways to amplify, new facets like the portal and shared services. And I can't absolutely definitively say it's going to be in the guidance, but our intent is to certainly try to address these new components in ways that allow tribes to, if they're interested, and kick the tires on this new technology. So we're really excited, and I really want to give hats off to the tribes that have been engaged in these calls and giving us feedback. They've been devoting a lot of their time and effort to this, and hopefully it'll all be good.
Great, thanks, Matt. Frank Harjo also had a question. On page 5 of the charter, is EPA going to verify if tribal members are eligible? There's a little confusion there by the wording as to how tribal member requirements are spelled out in the charter. Is the RPOC setting guidelines? And there was an additional question, just if we could maybe talk a little bit about the NPC selection process as well. Those all sort of seem related. So.
Yeah. So go ahead,
This is Andrew Baca. So I think, and I have the draft charter up in front of me. So I think typical to what we do with other groups, it's the federal government entity that makes the determination that the requirements are met. But we can certainly share those with folks so that they know what they are in advance. But the third paragraph, I think, provides, the third paragraph on page 5 provides the explanation to that. So if there's a further question, it'd be great if we could take someone off mute and hear that.
Frank, I'm going to take you off mute just in case you have a follow-up.
Hi.
Frank?
Go ahead, Frank. Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, my question is really to the turnover or change in positions of a lot of the tribal members. And I just wondered how that's going to be dealt with on a tribal level in terms of people either, changing positions or switching out of tribal government, how that's going to be handled.
So where folks, and I'm giving you my experience based on how we've dealt with that with EPA's National Tribal Caucus. So the last paragraph on page 4 talks about, the FACA and UMRA requirements, and so it's, the members of the governance bodies must be elected officers of the respective governments or their designated employees with authority to act on their behalf. So if, for example, someone was serving and moved away from working for a particular tribal government, we would have to refill that position. If someone's tenure as an elected official came up and they were not reelected, we would also have to refill that position. So if you're looking at the the general membership numbers, they say up to 10 standing members. And the idea behind that language is to allow for the time period that will naturally exist when one member departs and we have to go through the process to identify another member. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that helps out quite a bit.
Great. Thank you, Frank.
Another quick follow-up. Are you saying like for just a staff member that's a member of a tribe that they need an actual appointment letter from the chief or national council to participate in the EELC?
So typically, and again, what's being proposed, and I think this is one of the things that we'd like specific feedback on during this consultation period is, we wanted to put a process in place that would allow us to identify up to 10 representatives. And so, typically the folks who participate in EPA regional tribal operations committees are doing so on behalf of their respective tribal governments. Some regions handle it differently, and I think one of the things we'd like feedback on is, is it necessary to, spell out a very discrete process, or can we just use, the process that we use for the NTC, which is, the RTOCs elect someone through their own process and procedures. The region, the EPA region, would be involved in just certifying that to the national body to ensure that they meet FACA and UMRA requirements. But I don't think all the regions, and this is just off the top of my head, I don't think they require a letter from, an elected tribal official. It is just a statement that this person, for the purposes of the National Tribal Caucus, or in this case the Leadership Council, is designated to act on the behalf of that particular government.
Okay, thank you.
Andrew, this is Andy Batten. Just that section in paragraph on page 5 where we really are looking for feedback on this, where we're asking the RTOC or the equivalent in each EPA region, they're invited to determine a method for selecting and to select that leadership council member, and then the regional administrator is really just in a certifying capacity. But we're really looking at the RTOCs themselves to and we're looking for feedback on this during this consultation to follow that similar model that is used today to determine the method for selecting and putting that leadership member's name forward.
Thanks, Andy. Anything else on selection process? So I have another question from Victoria, and this gets at sort of the why of e-enterprise. So she just mentions that she's continuing to be challenged in explaining why e-enterprise is important to tribal government and really what it is. It's sort of still a little abstract, which I know other people have struggled with as well, and that might explain the low participation. Can you provide a very basic way to introduce people completely unfamiliar with the Exchange Network? And I'm guessing the connection also with e-enterprise. Sorry.
This is Andy, and let me, I'll start if I can and invite the others to join. You know, we received a question about, you know, and maybe this helps encapsulate the question, you know, what are the benefits of tribes being involved in e-enterprise instead of the already established and existing Exchange Network? And, you know, the answer I gave to the NTC a couple weeks ago is that the enterprise builds upon the success of the Exchange Network. And since its inception around the year 2000, the Exchange Network focused on maximizing the efficient exchange of information through the use of data, web, and internet standards, all technology-based. The enterprise, in turn, builds upon this by ensuring that through joint governance that we're going to first streamline and modernize the underlying business processes before jumping to the technology solutions. And you know, I will volunteer that, you know, I'd been with the Exchange Network for all but one meeting that I missed in the year 2000. So I'd been with the Exchange Network along with Matt for over a decade. So regarding the question of Exchange Network instead of e-enterprise, all EPA programs and regional offices are engaged in e-enterprise as one of the 4 key transitions of EPA as we get ready for the change in administration. And we envision engagement by all tribes and in all programmatic areas, not just information technology and information exchange, as being critically important. It's important and beneficial for tribes to actively participate in the priority setting and streamlining of environmental programs. And participation in only the Exchange Network will fall short of the full and broad engagement that's necessary to understand tribal environmental priorities. You know, so that is it in a nutshell. That, you know, I think there's been a great deal of success with the Exchange Network, and tribes have been a huge part of that success. But we now want to step back, as Matt mentioned, with the diminishing of resources, and you know, we really need to look at, you know, what are we doing the technology for in the first place. We are automating a particular business process, and what e-enterprise is trying to do is say, could we jointly take that business process, decompose it, find where there is a more efficient way to run that process, and then apply automation. And the example I would give for those most familiar with the Exchange Network is in the area of exchanging water quality information. From my perspective, I think we hit a ceiling of 160 tribes that were exchanging water quality information. And if we just focus on the technology without focusing on making it easier to participate, we're going to have a hard time moving the needle above 160 tribes. So that's why we did the tribal roadmap, where we are really looking at the basic steps necessary to put together a water quality monitoring program, and then applying automation, seeing if we can lower the bar to participate, and then apply the automation so that more than 160 tribes can participate in that activity. So it really goes back to those 3 goals, which is streamline before we automate. Streamlining being the first goal, automating being the second goal, and the third goal being that joint governance, where we absolutely need to start with understanding this, you know, being a priority in the first place. Is this the right thing to be streamlining and modernizing? Is this the right thing to be automating? And that's where the joint governance aspect fits in. So it's streamlined before you automate and ensure that there's joint ownership. So I hope that's helpful.
Thanks, Andy. Victoria says yes, that was very helpful. And just as another quick follow-up for the folks on the phone, Victoria and Matt have already made connections. Any other questions?
I certainly welcome other questions. If folks have questions afterwards, I think any and all of us are available to engage. But if folks don't have any other questions, I want to be respectful and give folks the gift of time back. So last call.
I'm not seeing, not seeing any more come through, Andy, so I think that might be what you're going to do.
All right. Well, I want to thank you all for attending and submitting your questions and talking through some of them. I hope that this webinar is just another step in communicating a clear picture for our vision for e-enterprise for the environment. And I would certainly encourage you to continue to provide input, ask questions, and be part of the process. We have to improve environmental results together, and it's through this joint process that we are really trying to ensure that this is about one environment and making sure that the enterprise that's been entrusted to us, that we take care of it jointly. There's going to be a second webinar next Monday the 27th that will take place from 3 to 4. I would ask if you're available to please join in again, and if there are other staff you have or other colleagues that you can encourage to join, I'd please ask you to share that knowledge so that others can participate. I am going to be participating in several RTOC meetings over the next several weeks. This current consultation runs through July 29th, and our hope is to get some solid feedback, such as the questions that we had today. And the aim is that we would be able to finalize a charter, and in the month of September at our next face-to-face e-Enterprise Leadership Council meeting, that we would be able to ratify that charter that takes into consideration the comments that we received during this consultation period. Again, this consultation period runs through the 29th of July. So please continue to participate. I think it's really critical that we all are able to have an open discussion and make sure that everybody's voices are heard in this process. So thank you. And with that, have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.